If you think you know about sequence generators, you haven't even begun. Sequence generators in Informatica are easy to use, but deceptively so. Sequence generators have been the bane of some people's existence in Informatica for years. Many years ago, I wrote my own sequence generator document, which is floating out there on the web. I've long since updated it for different databases, for different versions. We're going to make that available to you. Sequence generators are an interesting topic. So let's talk about sequence generators. First, we're going to talk about the functionality, and to do that, we're going to start off with the software. We're going to identify just what a sequence generator is. So the sequence generator, as you might imagine, is another transformation in the transformation bar. So let's go ahead and drop it into the mapping. We're not going to use it, but we're going to take a look at it. We've got a next val and a curve val. And we'll talk about the properties of sequence generators in the next lesson. But before we go there, let's talk about what they're used. By default, what do sequence generators do? Right, they generate sequence numbers. Well, that wasn't so hard, was it? But let's take a look on the whiteboard and at what a sequence surrounding the sequence generator so we can get a better feel for why we really need to talk about it. Okay? A sequence generator is responsible for generating sequences. Well, we all know that. But there's a table in the repository. And don't forget that every time this thing runs, the session talks to the repository. There's a table in the repository. It's called RTSEQ. And keep in mind, by the way, if you decide to edit the repository directly, you will void your warranty with Informatica, hands down. So please, just because I give you a table name and a place to look, don't edit the repository in any way, shape, or fashion. You will destroy your licensing with Informatica. So just be aware of that. But anyway, the sequence generators and their values are stored in the repository that's in the database. So this is called the repository. And of course, in between here, over TCP/IP, we have the repository server. We call the rep server. Right? We showed you that in the architecture diagram. This is my sequence generator. And we have a next val and a curve val. Now, this is the interesting thing about sequence generators. Sequence generators, for the first time when they start up, obviously we're going to talk about some of the properties here in a minute. They always start at 1 unless you change it. And so this is 1 and 1. And they point at a specific target database. So whatever database target that you're set up for. So let's say you're going to Oracle. And this is a staging table. Right? So as you insert rows, Informatica throughout the life of the mapping will increment the next val. If you have 12,000 rows go through this mapping, then at the end of this mapping, the next val that's stored in the repository is 12,001. And the curve val is 12,001. So the second time you run this mapping, you come back into the staging table. What happens is the next val takes 12,001. So the next val takes 12,001, passes it downstream, and now your staging table, even if you truncate it, your staging table starts at 12,001. And that's probably not what you want, especially if you have billions of rows to deal with or hundreds of millions of rows to deal with. So just be aware, this is a problem with the sequence generator. Another problem with the sequence generator is that you're not only pointed at Oracle stage area, but you're pointed at Oracle stage in development. Well, what happens when this mapping migrates its way into test and into production? Well, there's an administrative switch in the migration path that allows you to move or copy the sequence generator values into test. But that doesn't really solve the problem. Let's say in test that, so this is your test environment. In test, you have a row with 12,001 already out there. And so you move this mapping over to the test environment, you run it in the test environment, and it fails. Why does it fail? Well, because this is supposed to be unique, and the database says, I've already got that number. So duplicate sequence numbers. So you got to be careful about all these issues of using sequence numbers. There's another problem with sequence generators, and the other problem with sequence generators is basically if you're in version 7 or back, this is an integer value. And finally in version 8 they fixed that. This is now a big int value, which allows it to go past 32,365 and all that kind of good jazz. So bottom line is there's some issues with the sequence generator that really I just avoid completely because I hardly ever use the sequence generators for any reason at all. But that's the introduction to the sequence generators. And with that, we're going to move on and talk about the sequence generator properties in the next lesson.